Opposing viewpoints are arguments that do not support your own argument. Your readers will not always share the same side as you do in an argument, so you must consider possible responses to these counter-arguments while you are writing. You must research the different sides of the issue you are discussing and consider how you would refute these counter-arguments. Why address opposing viewpoints in a persuasive paper? You may think addressing certain arguments may be crippling to your argument. After all, you don't want to plant doubts in your reader's mind, right? But by discussing opposing views in your paper, you show the reader that you understand and respect the opposite point of view, and you establish your credibility as a writer. It shows you understand the whole issue and have already thought through potential challenges to your thesis. Because of this, readers will be more likely to respect and listen to your views that you discuss in your paper. The University of Purdue's Writing Lab suggests it is important to consider other positions because in most cases your primary audience will be fence sitters. Fence sitters are people who have not decided which side of the argument to support. An opposing viewpoint should be addressed fairly and objectively. This shows the reader that you have considered all sides of the argument and will make it easier to show why you disagree with that viewpoint because you have explained why people may hold this belief. To address an argument fairly and objectively means to avoid using language that distorts the other side's position. For example, if you're arguing that global warmth is a myth, it would be inappropriate to suggest those who believe in global warming are left-wing lunatics who hate big corporations. This type of argument makes you sound a little biased and unreliable. To introduce an opposing viewpoint, you must make it obvious to the reader that you are addressing an argument that is not your own. These are a few examples of clearly showing that the opposing viewpoint is not what the writer is arguing. In a paper arguing that fast food can be part of a healthy diet, the paragraph that addresses opposing views might begin like this. It would be easy to believe that fast food cannot be part of a healthy diet. However, or in a paper over gun control, here is another example. People against gun control often point out that more laws wouldn't work because existing gun laws are so poorly enforced. This argument, however, is misleading. Here are some other approaches. But is it true that euthanasia is unacceptable in all cases? Or you could use the specific name of the author who presents the counter-argument like this. On the other hand, Fund argues that no matter which method you use, make sure that it is clear to the reader that you do not agree with the counter-argument while still presenting the argument fairly. In order to transition from introducing the opposing viewpoints to then refuting it, use transitional words that show the reader that the opposing viewpoint is now being answered. This is done through transitional words such as but, yet, etc. For example, it might seem as if taxes are too high, but in reality, Americans pay less income tax than others in most industrial nations. The phrase, but in reality, makes it clear that the writer is now presenting his or her own argument. This second example is a little more subtle, but still makes the clear transition. While Auerbach's claim seems plausible and is backed by a lot of evidence, his definition of the issue is inconsistent and unsupportable. By starting with the word while, the writer indicates that he or she will be arguing against this idea later in the sentence. In the following sentence, the word however is the one that serves as the transition back into the author's argument. Some argue that torture provides interrogators with valuable information to prevent terrorist attacks. Research, however, shows that most information gained through torturing suspects is unreliable or outdated. Understanding now how to use opposing viewpoints, you may ask, how do I organize the paragraph dealing with opposing points? When you present an opposing viewpoint, first, state the opposing viewpoint objectively and fairly. Next, present your own argument clearly, showing why you disagree with the opposing view. Once you have done this, you need to refute your opponent's argument using evidence that supports your own argument. One of the most effective ways to refute an opposing viewpoint is to expose any faulty assumption or inconsistencies in the argument. Addressing opposing viewpoints will make your argument stronger as you analyze their logic in this manner. Opposing viewpoints can and should be addressed in various places throughout your paper. You could address an opposing viewpoint in your introduction before your thesis if your opposing viewpoint is the motive for the essay, or it can be placed after your introduction where you can map the expected reactions to your argument before you talk about them. Often it's best to address opposing viewpoints in your body paragraphs when the opposing viewpoints relate to an idea in that paragraph. It is also very common to discuss opposing arguments near the end of the paper just before the conclusion. No matter where you put opposing viewpoints, make sure you do not overdo it. It is helpful to address more than one opposing view, but too many might obscure your main idea and make your argument hard to follow.